Hello and welcome back to another New Catholic Generation movie review. I'm your host, David. I'm here with Mark, the silent introvert, Joe, the Catholic apologist, and Ned from Parables of the Film Industry. Today we're here to review God's Not Dead 3, A Light in Darkness, the highly anticipated sequel to God's Not Dead 2, which was the first thing we ever took a look at on this channel, and perhaps the longest movie review we ever did.
True.
That was a two-parter.
True.
The only two-parter we've ever done. After watching it earlier, we followed the tradition of the monks and took a vow of silence so that we would first find out what all of us thought on this panel. So none of us know what the other thinks.
True. Very true.
So, Ned, I guess starting with you, what'd you think?
Just 1 second. Just 1 second.
It's gonna be good.
I liked it!
Couldn't say it on camera.
I liked it. How dare you?
And now he's mad.
I will always be mad after God's Not Dead. This time it's for different reasons.
Joe, what'd you think?
Well, I didn't like it, but I didn't hate it. So I'm just gonna kind of leave it at that for now.
Mark?
I liked it. I thought it was a pretty good movie. I thought there was a lot of gray situations, which I'm all for. We'll get more into it, but I liked it.
Well, taking a line from Mark, overall, my summary of the movie is nah.
Okay, so we're kind of more on the same page then.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot to unpack with this film.
Yes.
There is.
Yes.
To start off, first of all, at the end of God's Not Dead 2, there's a scene where the pastor, David A.R. White's character, gets arrested. And it very much seems like they're setting up that to be the plot of the third movie.
Yeah.
In the third movie, that plot arc is resolved in the first 2 minutes. Very much making it look like that was the original intention for the movie, and then they aborted that arc quickly and rewrote the rest of the film.
Which I was really happy about.
Yeah, me too, honestly.
Yeah, because this franchise, it has a very significant place in Christian cinema in that God's Not Dead, when it first came out several years ago, it was produced on a budget of $2 million, but it took the box office by storm. It ended up making over $60 million. It was one of the most profitable films ever and really made a name for itself in Christian cinema. Unfortunately, for a lot of the wrong reasons. It became kind of the face of what people would point to as everything wrong with Christian cinema. Demonizing its opponents, playing the victim card, being really melodramatic and not that great of a quality of a film.
But it should be celebrated.
Shut.
God's Not Dead 2 came out a couple years later to a lot of fanfare, a much wider film release, and was expected to basically make boatloads of money. It still made some money, but it only made $20 million. It was a steep drop off from the first film.
Thank God.
Yeah, and so
I haven't seen it.
God's Not Dead 2 bore a lot of similarities to the first film, basically making it look like it was kind of a cash grab, honestly.
It was.
I mean, the first film made tons of money. The second film was basically the same sort of plot rehashed.
Yeah.
It didn't bring a lot new to the table.
It didn't. It was honestly, it didn't bring anything new to the table. And if anything, they just basically upped up the ante. Yeah, they upped up the ante, the victim cards, the stereotyping. They basically just like overloaded in the next movie. And because honestly, as much as I hate God's Not Dead 1, like, there are some good qualities to it. And I'm using some very lightly. But the second one, I just hated it. I just thought it was just a terrible, terrible movie. And a terrible representation of what Christianity is. This movie, what the hell, Pureflix? You actually made an okay movie with God's Not Dead. I'm not forgiving the sins of the father, But I am. But you honestly made an okay movie with God's Not Dead 3. What the hell?
All right, so what's different about this one? Because a lot of the producer and the actors talked about this one's different, and sure enough, it was.
It was.
They tried.
Ouch. Wow. Okay.
I have to be completely honest. It actually does look like they tried in this one. Because, okay, so the first
More
one...
drone shots.
There were. There were lots of drone shots. Actually, that's something I will say. The cinematography was actually a little bit better in this movie than it was in the previous two. The acting was considerably better.
Save for one.
Save for one. Well,
save for one.
Save 1.5. I'm saying 1.5. The pastor, obviously, he's back, and he's honestly a bigger character in this movie.
He is the main character.
He's basically the main character in this movie, which I was not looking forward to, but to some degree, he was able to hold his own. But if it wasn't for the fact of my favorite character in this movie, which was his older brother, I don't remember the actor's name, but he's in My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and I love that movie. Yeah, he plays Ian in My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And honestly, he's fantastic in this movie. He is literally my favorite freaking character.
I'd have to agree with that.
Yes.
He's really good.
Yeah, he was very, very good. And both the pastor and his brother, they just have great chemistry together. And this is going to sound awful, and this is a bit of a plot spoiler, but the pastor's best friend from the two previous movies, he winds up getting killed in the arson accident that happens at the parish. And so it was kind of good that a new character basically came in to step in his shoes, except his older brother, he's not really a Christian. He's
not a Christian.
He's not a Christian at all. But yet he's willing to fight for his little brother because he loves his little brother and he loves what he tries to stand for. And I just found his character so relatable in many ways, because one of the biggest themes about this movie is the fact that everyone knows what Christianity stands for. They don't know why they stand for it. And honestly, that to some degree, there are plenty of great Christians, Catholics, Protestants who do go out there and they properly explain why we follow the things that we do. Scott Hahn's one of them. And there are many other, obviously Jim Caviezel, but
my guy.
Yeah. And there are many other great, amazing speakers out there who do truly live what they preach and explain why they live it. However, amongst a huge portion of the masses, they either don't live what they preach, whether it's they are just completely anti what Christianity actually stands for, and they just go completely in the other direction and be like, oh, I'm Christian and I do all these awful things, but it's okay, Jesus still loves me, But then there's also the other Christians who almost follow it basically, they believe that they're following the true word of God and the teachings of God in so many ways, but they're just hateful. They're not preaching through love and actually trying to live what they teach. They're honestly being just complete jerks. You know what I mean? And no offense to the people who have made the previous God's Not Dead movies, but honestly, that's the image that you guys were giving. With that you just don't listen to anyone. You are hate-filled, you stereotype, and all of that. With this movie, you actually gave me a glimmer of hope for actually analyzing yourselves and for am I really doing this right? Am I really trying to preach God's love, preach God's word in the correct manner? And I liked it for that. Honestly, I did. I was laughing, I was smiling. There were so many moments in this movie where I'm just you could have gone in that direction, but you didn't. And I am honestly extremely proud of that fact. I'm sorry, I have so much to say about this movie. But I think it's just because I'm the most vocal when it comes to this freaking series. But I think I should just go ahead and let it go on to someone else before I say any more. And eventually maybe come back to me. Joe, what are your thoughts?
Well, the problem that I found was that, okay, the good part, they went and strayed from the wrong thing they did before. What did they put in its place? The problem is there are a few problems with what they added in there instead. Specifically, and it's like you were saying, David, it's a little bit difficult to unpack because there's a lot there, and there are a lot of little elements of truth in here in the way that the final verdict, the final culmination ended up turning out. My problem is that it went a little bit too far in the other direction. I'm specifically thinking about, okay, spoilers, turn this off if you don't want to hear it. In the whole controversy is there's this church and it gets vandalized and there's an accidental explosion and they're looking to repair the church, but the school's like, it's causing too much controversy and we really do need the land, so we're going to confiscate it from you. And at first it looks like there's going to be a legal battle or whatever. And then it seems like it's going back and forth between this pole and that pole. The pastor ends up finding out who did the vandalism thing, which accidentally caused the explosion, which accidentally killed the pastor. He got mad, found the guy who did it, and went up to him, shoved him on the ground. There was this huge controversy and all this, you need to take a page out of your own book again, some like good stuff. But in the end, this pastor is talking to one of the guys he's been in conflict with, and the guy says, this never would have happened if you could have prevented all this. And he says, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. And then he goes up to this protesting group in the front of the church and says that, the church build, let them have the church building and we're moving to a different place. Like I said, there are good elements to this. The problem comes in with the form of argument that they're utilizing. The form of argument basically is saying, oh, I did this bad thing out of anger. And because there's this church over here, it is responsible for that, so I'm going to let it go. It should move away out of the presence of people. First off, I think there are some unrealistic things about the way that this plot was set up, which I can get to later.
That's true.
It was there were definitely I don't think that this whole thing would have happened in the first place.
Well, God's Not Dead is famous for that.
Right, but in theory, for this situation, buying it, that form of argument is basically saying, oh, well, this church caused this whole controversy by being there, even though it's a good thing, but since it causes controversy, then maybe it should go away. If we use that kind of argument, if we stick by that, then how do we justify God's presence in our lives? Because someone could literally use that very easily and just say, well, yeah, God's technically a good, but look he created all these people. And so all these people are doing these things and getting angry at each other. So we should just have God move away from our lives and then just stay in this little corner. And then maybe if they want, they can come and find him. Obviously there's more to it than what I'm saying. And we might be discussing this, but that form of argument is not a good one to adopt at all. That was not, I don't think, the solution to what this film showed. So while they did a lot of good things, they went a little too far in a different direction, just not getting there with okay, I don't have this bad message that's good. I need the good one, and it just wasn't completely there.
I don't think that was the argument of the film, though.
Yeah, I don't
the thing is, so to set up the plot, there's a church with the main pastor, David A.R. White's character, and his other pastor, the Nigerian one. And it gets vandalized by this guy who's angry. The church is on a campus. It's on campus land, and it's a public university of the state. The state bought the university. And after, there's a lot of controversy with this, tied in with the pastor getting arrested at the beginning, but then also because there was vandalization and some of the students feel that it's like unfair that only one religion gets represented. There's a legal battle over whether they can kick the pastor's church or just basically bulldoze it and get it off. And the board of the school that wants to get rid of this church and replace it with like a student center or something, they have the friend of the pastor be the one to tell him. And it ends up causing a huge fight. Everybody just gets really angry at each other. And the pastor, who is the one character out of all the Christians in the first two films that actually is a little bit grumpy and not a perfect person.
I know, yeah.
He spirals out of control, and he's just really angry at everything and everyone. And he eventually gets called out on it by several characters. And he comes to the conclusion that all of this fighting is not showing the other characters that he's in opposition with what a Christian is supposed to be like.
Yeah.
And I don't think the argument of the film is saying, yeah, the church is a bad thing. It shouldn't have been on the campus.
No,
I think it's the pastor realizing that it wasn't worth it to fight the battle and the anger it was causing on both sides.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, I understand that. And, like, this is where it gets tricky, because there's a lot of elements of truth in that of, like, yeah, the anger that he had was bad, and what he was portraying, you know, is as far as, like, he should have been showing what a Christian would have been like. But I guess particularly as Catholics, the church building means more. So, like, with for us as Catholic, you know, the Eucharist, the church is literally the house of God. Now, it's easy to get, if you're not Catholic, to get offended by that. What? Our church is the house of God. For you guys, it's where 2 or 3 gather in your name. I am in their presence. It's a kind of a spiritual presence. With us, it's not only that. Jesus literally resides in a church. It is literally a holy place. For example, if Jesus came and descended down onto this earth, just bear with me for the example, and he needed a place to stay over the night, and he came to a Protestant church and just, like, stay there for a night. Would you want to tear that church down at any point in the future? No, because Jesus literally was there. So there is a little bit of a difference, because as Catholics, the church building is something that actually is important and sacred. And I recognize that. But I also think that
it's not a Catholic church, though. The presence of the Eucharist isn't in that one.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It's Lutheran, and Lutherans, it's different, because even in the case where they don't have literally the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, it still should, like, the place where you worship still should be considered a holy place. And the way it kind of made it portray is like, oh, like, you know, we can just move this church to somewhere else. It still makes it seem more like, it made the church seem petty, where it's the anger that was being petty. So it was kind of like portrayed on the church like, I'm gonna, like, the church is the problem here in where it is, and that's, like, again, the situation itself is unrealistic, because the only reason people would be protesting in front of a church like that is if something super controversial was said inside, like it. And then if a church gets vandalized, that's, you know, the situation isn't realistic. But it's kind of putting that pettiness, like, on the actual church. And I still think, even if that's your place of worship, where 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, there should be a certain holiness to that you should at least believe in your building itself. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's not petty in and of itself. It's the arguments that you bring from that.
That's true, but it is one of those things that we do kind of have to obviously look at this from the more Protestant perspective, because, I mean, as Catholics, we take our Catholic churches dead freaking seriously, like freaking dead seriously. I mean, Protestants take their churches seriously too, in their own way, which is obviously, when it comes down to it, you know, it's a little bit harder, because, you know, because I'm sure, like, if we were in the movie, That's never happening. um, um, and this was more of a Catholic film than a Protestant film. You know, we would probably be making a little bit more of a hissy fit about it. I don't mean like hissy fit in like a bad way, but I mean we'd be a bit more passionate about it. And in that regard, that this is a holy place. There's a ton of relics here. There's the presence of God. There's all this and blah blah blah.
It would be a lot.
So
it would be a lot more.
Yeah, there would be a lot more room with it.
Yeah.
But because of the fact that it's Protestant, and this is not speaking against our Protestant brethren in any way. This is just this is just something that me using to be a Protestant before. Like when we look at a church, it is a place, as you said, it is a place where where two or more are gathered. That's we're in the presence of God and we're praising Him and all that fun jazz. There was once a Protestant church that I used to go to up in Maine, and something bad happened to it. I don't remember. I think it might have burned down or something. But they simply were just like, okay, we'll just go ahead and pick up the pieces and go find a different place. That's what I kind of gathered from here. It wasn't like, I think it was like they're disregarding the fact that the church is a holy place. It's simply just because it's like, okay, we're still here. We can pick up the pieces. We can move on. And even at the end, when the pastor was speaking, he was like, me and my friend, we had a discussion. This is now going to be in the what was the building?
A student center?
A student center. It's going to be now a student center. And we will still be welcome here to be able to still perform our Christian mission in some way. So in that regard, like it was still there, and there was obviously it's not a church anymore, so it's not going to be a moment of a place of prayer or anything like that, but or being able to go to mass or church service or whatever the hell. But there was what the heck? This is a Christian channel after all. It's a little bit hard to see where you're coming in from that, but I can see it. But it's also because of the fact that I'm just taking this as a Protestant production. It doesn't really bother me in that way. If it was Catholic,
right.
I would be flipping out a bit more.
That part particularly is like, it's kind of bothersome. It's not extremely. It's kind of bothersome just because I'm trying to assume the best of you guys, and that you would you consider your place of worship a holy place. Yeah. Even though you don't, it's not. Never mind.
It is a holy place in.
Is holy, but I was talking specifically about like the Eucharist and Catholicism and the relation between the two.
No offense to Protestants whatsoever.
Yeah, so just definitely, I completely agree. If it was Catholic, like it would be a little bit different situation. Like, who cares about church? But I think definitely, even if it's not the main plot of it, I think the form of argument that they used is like, it just like you went so far on trying to get the heart of things right, which you did, but you didn't do the right thing as far as using the right amount of truth to make the argument with just being like, oh, we're just gonna like go away, hide in the corner. That you can't apply that.
Now, someone who hasn't spoken yet.
Marc, you barely.
Look, we know you're the silent introvert, but speak up, man. Tell us to shut up.
I know. I was just letting you speak your part because I kind of agree with Ned in the fact that I like the fact that there was no I found this to be a very interesting character study.
Yes.
And that's how I approached the movie, because Ned comes from it from a critical standpoint. Joe comes from it from a theology standpoint. I come from it from a writing standpoint. And I like to look at it from whether or not is it simple or not. And they portrayed this situation, unlike their other two movies, it's incredibly complex and incredibly
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
I love the fact that they try to use multiple tactics to try to force the other side's hand. I like the fact that everybody did something wrong.
Yes.
I love the fact that there was an atheist who wasn't vilified, who stayed an atheist throughout the entire movie.
Well, technically, there was an atheist in the second movie who stayed an atheist through the whole thing, but I just thought, like, both atheists in that movie, both the villain atheist and the hero atheist, were honestly incredibly unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the one example when I was like, wow, I think this is a far more realistic atheist than I have seen in most movies.
And I like the fact that, like, they brought up some hard questions about the whole, like, how Christians act towards one another, to the point where it almost seemed very meta.
It was very meta.
It was very meta.
Because I like the fact that if Christians in the U.S. sometimes have a persecution complex.
They do.
And then he brought that up. I like the fact that he brought up the fact that he was questioning, and the fact that a major theme is that it's okay to question and to ask the hard questions about your faith, because if you get past that, it just makes your faith that much stronger. And I like the fact that because he was questioning and didn't have the strong support, that is actually more so than the questions he had what broke him from his faith. Because I found that to be more realistic than anything that the characters were going through. Because I've experienced that in my own life, where people have been questioning, and because they didn't have the correct foundation and the correct support from other people, sometimes from family, that it drove them even further down the rabbit hole instead of bringing them out into the light. And so I just thought that was incredibly realistic, and my heart actually broke for him. And it shows what a good actor can bring to the table.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think the important part about what you were saying is that, a lot of times these movies have done persecution complex just on Christians. I don't think obviously full-fledged persecution does not happen in this country like it does in, say, the Middle East. That's off the table by no means. There are some Christians in their schools or whatever that are persecuted in some smaller ways. I'm not saying it's not a big deal. I'm just saying in smaller ways than stuff like the Middle East. At the same time, there are non-Christians who are also persecuted by other Christians in this world. And I think we could pull a quick little line from Paul, the Paul movie of, in the Paul movie when a certain conflict happened, Paul was saying, there are always going to be some of those, Christians or people in following God that go astray somewhat. And that's, I think, true across the board. A lot of different times there are people on both sides that will go astray. And this movie did a good job of portraying that, of like you were saying, both sides did something wrong. Both sides, in a way, in minor manners, persecuted each other.
Yes,
and it's not that I'm saying like, oh, Christians never get persecuted. Why are you saying no? Yeah, sure, Christians get persecuted for some stuff. Yeah, talk to a lot of young people that go to public schools. It happens.
Yeah, it does.
But it also happens the other way sometimes, and it doesn't always happen with everybody because everybody is complex and different. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely something I completely agree and really liked about the movie.
I like the fact that they brought up the whole Christians will, in this country we are allowed to worship whatever we want, but there's always the understanding that it's supposed to be a Christian thing. Like, the fact that Jewish holidays aren't, in public schools, they aren't, you don't get days off for them. But you get days off for, Easter and Christmas and all that kind of stuff. And they kind of very subtly pointed that out in this movie, and I really liked that. I thought it was a very interesting point because it was a minor character who brought it up, and I was just like, technically he's right. Because Christians, they do get more leeway than other religions. And I thought it was a very interesting point to bring that up in a Pureflix film.
Yeah, I honestly very much agree with that.
For me, I guess with you guys talking about the different perspectives you come from, either as a film critic or from the theological perspective or from the writing perspective. I was looking at it from an argument perspective and like how they represented both sides of like, is it authentic? As you guys mentioned earlier, there were some unrealistic dynamics in the first two films. With the first one, it was the fact that, every Christian was portrayed as saintly, except for maybe the girlfriend of the main character.
That's true.
And every atheist was portrayed in a very villainous way. The problem with the second film that I saw was that they addressed some of the criticisms of the first film, but in a very sort of superficial way.
Yeah.
Like with the lawyer, basically, they didn't really give him any character development. His character development was saying, I'm not a Christian, but I'm still going to act like all the other Christians in the film and fight, against the evil atheists.
Yeah.
There wasn't any sort of like development. The most interesting thing to me about the third film is that there were so many moments where I saw characters voice exact criticisms that we've said and that tons of other people have said throughout media of the first two films. Even down to like that character of the lawyer where he had no character development. In the third film, there's a similar situation where David Ayer White's pastor character, his older brother Pierce, who is the fallen away Christian and a lawyer, comes down to help him. And, David Ayer White's pastor character asks him, why are you fighting for me? I mean, since you don't really believe this stuff. And he says, I'm fighting for you because you're my little brother and I don't want you to be pushed around. But yeah.
And that was incredibly realistic.
Yeah, like they actually gave the atheist a ton of character development.
Yes.
They brought it all out. Overall, I'll be very interested to see what the fan base of the Gods Not Dead movies thinks of this, because the third film, interestingly, sort of felt like a rebuking of the first two in a lot of ways.
Yeah. That's like one reason why it's like very like hard to... It's very hard for me to defend this film just because of how much I've been vocal about this entire franchise. But yeah, as David said, this film, it seems like it's rebuking the last two movies, and I'm just like, why?
Well, it comes across to me as a film made for the critics.
Yes.
Like I felt like this was a film that was made for us, the people that were yelling about the first two.
Well, thank you very much, Pureflix.
I actually think I think that's true, but I actually think it's a little too late for it, though.
Yeah, it's very too late.
Because the damage has been done, and I honestly don't think this movie's going to make any money because we already have two Christian films come out the previous 2 weeks, and I think there's not going to be enough of the fan base to be like, well, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Fool me 3 times, even though the third one is a good movie, I'm not even going to see it.
I guess coming from the YouTube world, I've seen a lot of YouTube stars do some not great things and then do damage control.
Oh, what are you talking about?
I'm not actually talking about Logan Paul.
I know.
There's a lot of YouTubers, although I guess way in the past, where like they've done stuff and then they'll sort of like shoehorn in something to like say like positivity and stuff without really addressing the criticisms against them. I've seen that pattern over and over again where like a YouTuber do a really bad thing or they'll just like have a bunch of negative publicity, but then at the moment of everybody attacking them and like calling them out on what they've done, they'll be like, okay, all right, now in my next movies I'm going to make a video going to visit one of my fans who has cancer. And I'm going to talk about, how much it meant to them for me going to see them have cancer and how we just need to spread love and positivity and sing Kumbaya and everything else. Yeah. And basically, like, not actually addressing any of the criticisms against them. Like they just want to shove it under the rug and say,
Yeah.
well, now if you criticize me, you're criticizing somebody who just visited somebody who, you know, was being nice to a cancer patient. So it's just sort of comes across just as very much PR, very phony.
Yeah.
In this one, because they actually addressed in a very realistic way, or like it was spoken very realistically, the criticisms of the first two films.
Yeah.
I feel like they were really trying, like they were not shying away from the problems of the first two by addressing in the third one. So that to me is a sign that they were sort of taking the criticisms to heart and really trying to improve, instead of trying to make this one a shove the problems of the other one under the rug and just say, we're about love. Now you can't criticize us or you're criticizing love. And just sort of like trying to use that to cover it up. As one of the guys at the end of the film even says, who was protesting, the pastor's like, call it a publicity stunt maybe, but I think this dude's legit.
Again, this movie's very meta.
Yeah.
Very, very meta.
Do anybody else have any brief things to go over, or are you ready to close?
I think there were just two moments I just wanted to talk about, which really did stand out to me. And this kind of goes back to the whole persecution complex thing, and at the same time, when Christians honestly sometimes harm other Christians. These moments kind of like hit a little bit close to home in some ways, but I'm not really going to like super get into it because it's my right to comment section. But one of the arsonist, his mother apparently wound up divorcing his father, and the reason why that happened was because she was being beaten constantly by him. Now, depending on where you go to, a lot of Christian sects, including Catholicism to an extent, they'll go ahead and say that was justified because no one in their real... If when you get married... excuse me. Sorry. When you get married... You gotta freaking love your wife, and you gotta love your freaking husband, you know? You gotta actually treat them like your actual freaking spouse. And when it eventually does come to, and this is the stuff that I've started to learn because I just got finished taking marriage prep classes from some pretty dang amazing people. Physical abusive violence on your significant other, that's honestly, like, from what I learned, it's a reason for annulment. But if it carries on and there's no fixing, if if it's not addressed. And and the thing is, like, eventually, obviously this is not really a huge big point in the movie, but it's enough for like this character to show like why he has his doubts about Christianity in general, which is understandable. But when his mother divorced her abusive husband, apparently their entire congregation basically threw them out because they're like, oh, you divorced your husband, you can't do that, and now if you marry anyone else, you're basically cheating on your husband. And I understand that marriage in of itself is very much under attack in the United States. It really is. But because it's so heavily under attack, we also have to make sure that, as much as we cannot let the wrong ones, escape when it comes to like divorce or annulments or anything like that, we also do have to make sure as Christians that the right ones, the reasons why the relationship broke, that there was actually reason to it, that you actually do recognize it. And this is something that I've like heard from a lot of parishes, from a lot of Christians, and even from my own workplace, that Catholic and Protestant churches have been openly like attacking some divorced married couples. Now, as I said, a lot of them, honestly, it's understandable, a lot of them, but there are many times, especially when it comes to abuse or cheating or any of those kinds of things, that you really do actually have to freaking look into it and not just be like, oh, they got divorced, therefore we should just go ahead and chastise them. Another point I really wanted to bring up, which I really loved, and this was probably one of my favorite moments in the movie, was when David A.R. White's character, the pastor, was speaking to the the new black pastor of the movie, the thing I loved so much about this scene was, and this kind of just goes about the whole persecution complex thing a bit, and how people handle being persecuted. David A.R. White's character, I mean, he was being persecuted to an extent. I will say that, and it wasn't entirely unrealistic, but there were obviously some unrealistic elements to it, obviously. But, he was just, like, angry. He was upset. And he's just like, I just feel like I'm abandoned by God. And that I am just, I'm just feeling like Christians should not be just, like, flopping over and just letting people walk all over them. And the black pastor, he talks to him and he says, there are honestly far worse scenarios than yours out there right now. And there's some, like, really bad stuff going on than this, in all honesty, petty squabble between your church.
I do want to add, just like the way that scene plays out is the pastor first says Jesus, Jesus preached about love and tolerance and like forgiving your enemies and stuff like that, and then he says, I think you'd understand what I was going through, and then he rebukes him. Right,
exactly. I think you would actually understand what I'm going through, but in fairness, you can't. Thanks for adding that, David. And then he says, excuse me, I am a black Christian
in the South.
Brother, I'm a black pastor in the deep South. What do you think I've gone through?
Almost a direct quote.
It actually is. Maybe not as energetic, but
I think it was that energetic.
Actually, yeah, it kind of was. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, yeah. And honestly, I'm just like, it's true. This was so petty what was happening, and this pastor was far more loving and caring about like a lot of the stuff that was going on than this guy who was just than David A.R. White's character. And I'm just like, thank you for actually bringing that out. Like I said, I will go ahead and say this again. This has been the hardest movie for me to defend. Or even say good things about, because I hate the franchise. Literally freaking hate the franchise. With our new rating system, both the previous movies are in the Inferno. Like, the lowest level of the Inferno.
A lot of ice.
A lot of ice. And with this movie, honestly, you're definitely far from a great movie. I loved you. I liked you. That's right. I said I loved you. I know. Obviously, there's still plenty of flaws in some of the arguments, in some of the characters, and the acting, and even in some of like the whole scenarios and everything. So, but hey, do you know what? Your movie's in Purgatorio, okay? That is a huge step up. Do you know why? Because that means you're closer to God.
Just first off, where in Purgatorio? Any?
Oh, okay. I would put it
middle, top, and.
Do you know what? I'll put it in the middle. I'll put it in the middle. Okay.
Oddly enough, that's exactly where I was planning on putting it. Basically, yeah, I agree with you. Now I have it as kind of like the middle of Purgatorio. Super big step up for a lot of the things I corrected in the last film. Really, one of the most important things, they gave hope. Hope is a theological virtue, and really important in the film industry, I would say as well. You actually gave hope for the future of Pureflix, and so I'm very happy with the steps you made. Just still a lot of cleaning up to do, but hey, that's what Purgatorio is for.
All right, Mark.
All right, we're going. I'm also going to put it in Purgatory. I think for it to be in Paradiso, you would have to do like so many cleaning ups, and I think you can't, I almost think that this series can't be put in Purgatory, in heaven, Paradiso, because there was too many mistakes that had already been made, and that's always going to weigh on the series.
Yeah, that's where I was planning on putting it, as well, as it turns out. And finally, for some of the same reasons. One being, this film, although I do think the heart was in the right place this time, it still has the weight of the first two films on it, to the point where it would be hard to recommend this one because I don't know if it quite works as well as a standalone film.
No, it doesn't.
I was interested in it just because this series is just fascinating as a thing of Christian cinema that has been part of everything. But I wouldn't really recommend this film to like newcomers per se, or just like to oh, you gotta watch this third this trilogy because the third one's really good, but the first two I don't know. So that's hard. I mean, the other reason I put it in purgatory is just like from a couple of like filmmaking things. I mean, there still is a little bit of the just corniness and over the topness with how they portray the message. There's a moment at the end where like they have news anchors throughout the film, and I feel like the news anchors just say stuff that's just way too on the nose, and it's like it reminds me of like in comedy, you're not supposed to like explain the joke every time. It's just a little like okay. There's a moment where we remarked really funnily. It's like David Ayer White's character does kind of like a filibuster in front of the church to prevent it from being thrown down. And it's like, well, that's funny. That's kind of like a filibuster. And then the news anchors are saying, hey, what do you know? It's like he's doing a filibuster. And it's like, you're explaining the joke too much. And then at the end, it's like, when David Ayer White decides to, give up the church, it's like the news anchors are like, wow, is he rolling over? Well, I don't know. It's not hard to see the analogy between him and Jesus. And it's like, well...
It was for me.
It's awkward to say that. Like, you don't need this, like...
Yeah.
Like, just leave the audience to interpret the message. Don't say, like, David Ayer White is Jesus, guys. Did you not get it? Did you not get it?
Yeah, guys, what's wrong with you? It's obviously Jim Caviezel.
Heresy!
Oh, dear goodness. I think we're done with this review.
Yeah. Anyways, David Ayer White, Michael Mason, Shane Harper, and any of the people involved with this. If you guys are watching... we don't hate you.
No.
We do appreciate the effort that you put into this film.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we hope Pureflix continues to make good films because I think they've had some good ones. I used to associate the name Pureflix with garbage in my mind, and their past couple of films haven't been that bad. I liked Case for Christ.
Yeah.
I thought this one was a huge step up. I think you guys didn't trash Samson. I wasn't part of that panel, but it was
okay. It was okay.
Yeah. So keep at it, Pureflix.
Seriously.
Keep getting better.
Yeah, definitely.
Look forward to seeing what's coming next. Anyways, thank you for watching this New Catholic Generation movie review. Hope to see you next time. Have a happy Easter.
God bless, guys.
Bye.